We have Vincent Finaldi of Telecloud, and Vince and I connected for the first time at the Telarus Partner Summit in Nashville. We happened to just, by happenstance, sit together at a table during one of the, we'll call it the speeches that were going on in the cafeteria hall there. And we connected, and I started to appreciate, what he does. And we started talking together about what I was doing. We found some alignment. I actually did some marketing work for him. We're not here to talk about that, but that is how we got connected. And I just think Vince has a really authentic way about going to market and what he does. I think he is just a regular dude. He's a good guy, and he does right by his clients. And the company's been around for, I think it's exactly 42 years. So before I go any further, I want to hand it over to Vince to give himself an introduction, give the high level on Telecloud, and we can get into picking it apart.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It was good meeting you at the Gaylord Hotel, which was beautiful and massive, and it was like its own little ecosystem, if anyone's been in the Gaylord Hotel. But as far as what do we do? So we've been at this game a while. So we're a second generation operated business, and we're what you call a traditional telecom interconnect, where we would service clients in the tri-state area, typically New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. So more of a Northeast regional provider. And we would do what we're all trying to do, which is service great clients, keep a good brand and a good service reputation, and help customers with all things telecom, voice related, which anyone who has been following any of the technology trends knows the voice and telecom industry has shifted dramatically. So I would say we've in 2014 shifted to a cloud model. So we stayed up to date with the technologies and the offerings and the pricing strategies. So we're still here and we're still at it 42 years later, which is crazy to say that number out loud, especially in an industry that's so radically changing with so much acquisition and so much change every decade. So we're still doing our thing and staying relevant for the modern workforce.
Yeah, I can agree with that, as many of us can, in terms of the 2022, 23 layoffs. I was in the UC space myself, and unfortunately was laid off with quite a few other people, not just the company I was with, but across the board. But I think it's folks like you and Telecloud that have a specific focus on the market segment and the geographic area that you do. Obviously, you're doing something right. I think that comes down to, working with you and understanding that it's a very sort of human connectedness approach. You are very focused on providing really that white glove service and providing excellent support to your clients. Elaborate a little bit on some of the changes that you're seeing in the UC space in terms of the technology and the market and those acquisitions, as well as how that relates to the value of what Telecloud is providing in terms of that really deep human connection level in terms of service.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I look at it like this from my vantage point. I would put myself, so any of the viewers or anyone listening to this for a few moments would know, I have two hats, my ownership hat and my selling hat. So I'm going to think more of earning new business in the market, strategic partners. So what do prospects and customers want, particularly on the buying and evaluation side of the house, but the front end of the house? So what I found, especially post-COVID, I kind of think COVID was a little bit of a turning point because it sped up the adoption rate of the services needed, 10x the speed. So what should have taken 10 years for like the world to change to just happened overnight with remote work, hybrid work models, video collaboration, Microsoft Teams, 365, which has 320 million users. So if I had to answer your question, what I find is businesses, many are confused in the sense that they don't know what is the best solution for them because there isn't a one size fits all. For example, if you take a good, successful small business, let's take a 50-person company, just to make it very relatable and very easy to digest. A 50-person company has a small sales team of 5 to 8 people using a CRM, like a HubSpot or a Salesforce. Then you have the staff also using Teams for internal messaging, calendar management over here. So you have a sales team using Salesforce or HubSpot or Zoho or whatever. Then you have a Teams adoption for internal communication and calendar management. Then you have externally some sort of a telecom and IT service. And I think businesses are kind of like, how do I make this more efficient? How do I make this cost effective? How do I solve more goals? Let's face it, what do customers want? The same thing we want: more clients and increased profits and happier employees. Like, we all want the same thing. And I found, if I had to oversimplify this, I think people are confused and they're not quite sure what SaaS provider or what UCaaS provider to go with. Because let's face it, we all look and sound the same at this point. It's 2024. Pricing is very similar. Differentiation is very similar. So in a commoditized based sale, how do you stand out? And I think you do it the same way, the test of time. You develop trust and solve people's problems. And I think if you oversimplify that, I think you could be a successful service provider on the general side without going into really custom, unique problem solving.
Totally agreed. I think across the board, there is a lot of, we'll call it the app sprawl. A lot of people are involved in so many different things they need to run their business from a communication standpoint. We all know the benefits of UC and being able to put all the communications applications for internal, external into one place and not having to have that toggle tax and going back and forth. But I think, you're a little modest with it, I think, in terms of, what you're able to do, because it's not always the case that you have someone who's involved and invested in and thinking even about a CRM. Usually the question of like integrations and CRM is an afterthought, and a lot of discovery with maybe some of the larger suppliers that are out there. And this isn't a knock on them. They all have their specific lanes,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, as far as I know, you guys are not heavily invested in deep contact center, IVA, IVR, stuff like that. Have, of course, the UC aspect from the IVR, but you are really focused on just providing reliable support. Where I've met with your team, I've talked with your support folks, I've talked with your sales guys, and I understand that the reason why people work with you is because you are still involved, you're human beings, you care about what's going on. And I don't know that you're going to get that with a supplier, specifically in the market that you're kind of focused on, which, as I understand it, is more of the SMB space, where you might be shipped overseas for support. And you might be, like you said, commoditized.
It's funny you mentioned that, Dan. I probably take for granted how obsessed I am and we are with service. Like, I assume everybody's like that. So it's probably more a naivety in my part. Like, of course, it's a paying customer. You're going to be obsessed with every communication thread they have and make sure they're happy. So it could be just from where I come from. We're usually about 15 to 30 full-time employees, depending on, the year and how well or not well things are going. So we only know controlling the service experience directly. So it fields to our team, which happens to be in New Jersey. And now we have employees scattered all over. But we're a localized service provider on the remote side, US based. And when clients have more complex issues or more local area network issues, we go on site to troubleshoot them. So this is all I've ever known since joining the business 18 years ago. So I probably don't know how a poor service experience can go because I only know what we do. Does that make sense?
It does. It completely does. I've had a variety. It's ironic when you really put this down to terms in kind of, in a weird sense, we're almost competitors in this sense. I help clients with UC, right? I could be, selling and bringing them to some large supplier that's going to pay me out some upfront spiff on a deal that I could be bringing to you, but I have you on because I care about my clients like you do, and we have alignment there. And I would make happily referrals to Telelcloud and to you because I know my clients are going to get taken care of. And I think that's the difference.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Like, let me personalize it. So you're in Long Island, right?
Correct.
Sure. So it's right over the bridge, a little bit of traffic, but it's not too hard from New Jersey. So like like a recent win for us is we onboarded AFC Urgent Cares. They're a franchise of Urgent Cares, and we won the Long Island account. So there was about 5 Urgent Cares in Long Island. I'm funny. The towns in Long Island are always like American Indian based, like Massapequa and really strong Indian names.
Massapequa. So anyway,
amongst other, Pohog, is that one?
There's Patchogue and Hopog and Ronkonkoma.
Ronkonkoma. Yeah. So we just did that job recently. So I just to me, it's just like you wake up in the morning you service the crap out of local clients and you want them to be happy at all times. Like it's just in the DNA.
Right.
So I'm like, the reason why I think a smaller provider can compete, win, and profit in this space is because when you are a $1 billion supplier that have great technology and people, not to even knock, I'm a fan of Dialpad, RingCentral, Vonage, Zoom. But when you get to the point where it's publicly traded companies with billions in revenue, a $2,000 a month bill is only going to get so much attention.
Right.
And so they're like, yeah, let's outsource it to the Philippines with low rate labor. And hopefully the client doesn't leave and, just set it and forget it. And
yeah. I mean, listen, you are spot on with one of my recent guests, which was Brian Nichols over at Sharpen, and they are extremely deliberately, like you, focused on a very particular market segment and providing services that are relevant and designed for the SMB space. I recommend connecting you with them. Actually, you probably could do a great deal of business with them because they're focused entirely on contact center. But
oh, great.
What they do is build something that is a vehicle that is form fit for SMB. They focus on making it simple, providing great support. They have a customer advisory board, like, you basically, that can take feedback and develop features and functionalities and processes that are tailored to their market. Whereas, like you mentioned, maybe some of the other providers that are out there, these billion-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars organizations, a lot of them are adapting to the shift over to the non-differentiated or less differentiated contact center and AI. So they're pouring resources into that while deprioritizing the things that you're great at. So I think it's opening up a space for you to continue to shine in the way that you do.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point. And the technology itself is critical. So we have other areas in the business that focus on keeping the product stack up to par. In the UCaaS suite, even though we take it for granted because it's a mature industry, I mean, it's still wild what's happening with Teams integration, SMS texting applications that your clients need. So like the ability to text, you go on a Google listing and it has a number. Like the ability to text that number is not like a nice to have. It's like business 101 at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
So you have your SMS suite of services, you have your video suite of services, you have your AI call center, reporting, recording, like how do you manage the team? So I probably just take it for granted because I'm so deep into it, but that's definitely a huge focus of ours because you could have the greatest service in the world, but if your product is weak sauce, I mean, the customers are still going to say goodbye.
Yes. And there's a few different segments of the progressions of the advanced technologies that we kind of just glossed over in terms of the differences between unified communications as a service, call center, and then contact center. And then you start layering on the AI conversation on top of that. Where does Telelcloud fall in terms of what they're providing and what they don't provide in those advanced features? And before you answer that, I just want to layer another thing that's kind of a nuance, but even like you said, SMS text messaging, right? Like you have to understand 10DLC. You have to understand all of these little things. Right. But I can guarantee, and this is an assumption, but you guys have an intimate knowledge of that process and how to help your clients with it. Whereas with some others, and I don't name names because we're not trying to take people down here, but it's an email that I get to go through a help article, through some portal to do this. And like, I can't figure it out, and neither can the small business owner, right?
I just had that experience with a supplier. I'm not going to say who because it's not relevant.
Right.
But I'm like, you sent the client a link on how to submit their number to campaign registry, which is a time-consuming, administrative, and a little complex. I'm like, that is not how you solve it. You do it for the customer, and you hold their hand proverbially. Proverbially.
Yeah, you got it.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it.
No, that's really cool. You mentioned that. And so to answer your question, the reason I met you in Telarus is, so we have been and always were a direct service provider, but you can't be all things to all people. And so when the opportunities come, particularly if we have an existing client that 10Xs and let's say outgrows our product stack, where you immediately tell them like, never perceive you're going to outgrow us. We'll always be there for you as your telecom partner, even if it means putting your services with another supplier. If there's something really unique, like if you need a best-in-class Salesforce integration, I'm going to say, hey, let's get you the best supplier that can do that. We don't ever want to be perceived as a provider that kind of pretends you could do it.
Yeah.
I don't know, back in the day, how many features were listed on the PowerPoint slide that like, could the product really do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do it well.
Right.
And then what I also find with customers is it's less about features. It's more like, what can they digest? Like the person buying the product or service, the business, are they 250 people with strong IT? Or are they 50 people with strong sales, but weak IT? It's like they can only consume so much technology before they're just paying for crap they don't even have the ability or sophistication to use.
Yeah.
So that's also part of like in our sales process, we're just pretty transparent. We're like, who on your end can run with this? Like we can provide the tech, we can train you and support you and be there, but like you got to have someone in-house that champions this because we're all just too busy.
One of the biggest problems with the new technology is always adoption. And then there's also the implementation. So I know you guys are involved. You can do cabling and other VoIP services that are connected to the whole UC VoIP environment, as well as providing white glove onboarding and training to help with adoption. So if they don't understand it, they can't use it. So talk about that a little bit.
Well said. Well, there's two components to address that. In the SaaS world we live in, the local area network is forgotten. So if it's like a software as a service, like there is no infrastructure. But if you have an existing business that's been around for 20, 30, 40 years that has a physical environment, there's a physical component to the project, meaning low voltage cabling, network switches, routers, overhead paging, door mates. Like you go to the front door and you hit the little button. Like that's the physical component of telecom that gets very overlooked because it's kind of not sexy. It's kind of time consuming. It's the part of the process that SaaS salespeople don't want to talk about, the physical component. Like in this world of zeros and ones, like we're forgetting, like there's still a world of things.
Yeah.
So what we do well is we combine the SaaS software component with the physical component and just make the onboarding easy for the customer. Like we're not going to bore the customer with how an overhead paging is going to work, but we're going to get it to work. So if you have 8 guys or 12 guys in the warehouse working on something mechanically, you could still have the buzzer overhead. Things that I think get really lost really quickly when you're talking with awesome suppliers like Zoom and Dialpad. They just don't want to talk about it because they can't solve it.
Yeah, they can't support it. I mean, and I want to highlight the fact that this is, again, not knocking on these larger suppliers. They have a market, they have their place. It's just that you have a very specific niche that you serve better. That's inarguable.
Yeah, we sell their service. So it's not a knock. It's just very clear when the SaaS model and like, we'll light you up in 1 week and you could start utilizing the software. Like that's fine, but there's still my point is there's a physical component to this.
Right. Of course. And
that is slow, boring, and people don't want to do the hard work for it.
But you know what? It's the foundations that are 90%. You can talk all you want about the greatest new feature and this and this and that, but you guys are there to absolutely just nail the foundations. And whereas with you have the entire interconnected process, you consider the physical, whether it's, VLANs or the SIP language that connect the phones and maybe they're not compatible or whatever it is. Like you guys have the expertise in that. Things that I know that are involved, perhaps maybe not an AE for a supplier that's been trained on selling the specific features of this phone system. Whereas again, you cannot overlook the fundamentals.
Yeah, well said. I think that's important. I think that's just what happens when you do something for so many damn years. You just, that's just from years of experience, and you get so much bloody knuckles in business. If you do anything for long enough, you get, nice calluses on your hands and you're like, then you get good at something.
Yeah. You guys have the battle scars of, seeing the ins and outs of everything. So
yeah, imagine SIP trunking in 2009.
Yeah. It's
those
funny.
Were different times, man.
It's funny because I came into this whole world, it was like 18. It was relatively recently, about 6 years ago or so. And I kind of got the crash course going real fast as the technology was starting to skyrocket. Then, like you said, we hit COVID and I was going through the pressure cooker of learning and going through it. So I wasn't involved in like, the T1s and stuff like that. When I was coming in, it was coming off MPLS and SD-WAN is the big thing. Now SD-WAN is like table stakes too. And you have that, but I know you also work with a TSD partner like myself to
Mhm.
help clients source other technologies. So what I would think is that when you build such a relationship of a foundational trust with your clients and doing such a good job, that you have the opportunity to help cross-sell some of the additional services that are outside the traditional communications stack in terms of maybe it's, providing the internet as well. Maybe it's
Mhm.
SD-WAN or even like cybersecurity or stuff like that. So can you talk a little bit about what else outside of your core competencies you guys are branching out
Yeah,
into?
absolutely. I would say if I had to boil it down to three or four things, you have the plumbing of the business. So every business is plumbing. Plumbing for us is internet circuits, redundancy, and things to get you into the internet highway. So we have a specialty with the plumbing side of the house. UCaaS is obviously our bread and butter and our core. But we also, through the TSD partnerships, we happen to work with Telarus. You get really competent at mobility suite. You get really competent at SD-WAN type technology. And on the IT side, so we're not an IT MSP provider. We partner with a lot of them, but you develop competencies. So we often help customers actually select the right MSP. If they're really unhappy with what they have, we help them shop it out. We help them make an informed decision, sort of unbiased. And when you're not the direct service provider, it's actually easier to make unbiased recommendations. So I'd say we got competency on the internet side, the mobility side, the IT side of the house, and just making sure our clients are taken care of. And those are the big two or three, I would say. And then on the physical side, you have cabling infrastructure, which is building networks. So then there's a physical component of what we do, which is the phone hardware, the overhead paging, the door mates, the cabling infrastructure that we have as well.
Yeah. Again, all the kind of triad that you're describing of the foundations that you need to make things work properly and
Yeah,
reliably.
well said.
But I want to transition a little bit into some of the things that I've observed, again, in working with you and some of the marketing, as well as what you're putting out there. And this is a personal opinion and a perspective that I have. I'm going to see what your thoughts are. I think there's a lot of, marketing and branding and stuff and out there that, isn't quite frankly valuable and genuine. I think the way that you go about it, because I follow you, I see a lot of your posts, and you're constantly extending that personal relationship in the way you are. And it may not be so obvious to some people out there because I know you on a behind the scenes personal level, but you present the community and the LinkedIn community and your followers with really valuable insights and things about your day-to-day life that result in value to your community. So can you just talk a little bit about, how you're going about sort of presentation to the LinkedIn community?
Sure. On the personal side, I view, like many of us, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it's your personal brand, and it's what you're putting out there. And it's a very, very noisy world. We all know that. We click our Twitter button and you get, you're overwhelmed with like 8,000 commentaries. Same with LinkedIn. So I try to be useful and valuable. Like, all right, I've been on this earth, 41 years. I've learned a thing or two. Like, what story can I share that isn't self-promoting, that maybe could help someone in some way, whether it helps me or not, and what story do I have to tell? Like, we all have something to say. And so I've been doing that on my LinkedIn side. And it's really the 5-letter word called trust. I think what you find if you share your story enough and have an authentic voice that isn't, just a clever way to sell your crap. I think if you come from a place of authenticity, people over time feel that. And I don't see any downside to it, especially if you have something useful to say. But at the same token, be careful because you can get, sucked into the social media world and you could lose a lot of time that isn't strategic. So I think you have to be careful and use it as the tool that it is. And on the business side, we've been making a lot of progress. We partnered up with a coaching company called Impact out of Connecticut. And they're a coaching company on best practices, like how to address what problems you solve, the buyer's journey, the customer and this customer journey. And it's really making your content and your value to the client, make it easy in the world of 2024 to do business. So that's on the business side. And thank God I have team members and partners that help with that as well.
Vince, it's funny because I started this podcast for a lot of the same reasons that align with what you're saying. And I want to try to make this a cohesive statement because there was a few things that came to mind when you were speaking there was, one of them is You're 42 years into the business, you yourself 18 years into the business, yet you're still spending money and spending time trying to figure out how to improve your already ace processes and stuff. And I think that shows a lot about your company and the way you do things. And then the second thing is marketing and branding. It's important. It's something you have to do. And if you do it right, like I think the way that you do it, you have to be able to market your services and stand out. Because how, if I'm, an IT director at a 5 location, AFC urgent care, like you said, which I think there's one like down the block from my house, how do I know if Telecloud and Vincent Finaldi are credible and capable? You can go to your website, of course, but like, how do you know versus some big box brand name that's got some animated video and some crazy, setup for marketing? How do I know what they're capable of and what they do? So I think you doing that is super important.
So I have a sales coach. I had one, and he actually gave me, I was years ago, about 10 years ago. And he's like, he told me something that stuck with me. His name's Mike. And he's like, how do you think it feels to be the customer? Everyone says the same thing. Our product is great. Our pricing is great. Our service is great. Imagine being on the receiving end of that from 4 different companies. Like, they don't know what to do. Yeah. So you better figure out how to get that message across and have all the testimonials and have all the case studies and, let the chips fall where they may. Yep. But you want to be the one having control, not controlling, but influencing the narrative.
Yeah.
It's probably a better choice of words. Help the customer make a good decision.
Right. And
that doesn't always mean you're going to make more money in that process. Help the customer and your life will be good. You will have a good life.
Yes. It's not about, listen, there's lots of ways to make the most money possible, right? There's a different way of living where you include that sort of intangible thing, the important thing, which is like, can you live with yourself doing it? And if you're projecting something that you're not just to gain business, you're not going to be successful in life, I think. And you're genuinely happy guy. To me, so
it's philosophical. Like we all want the same things. We all want more money. We all want more joy. We all want more freedom. We all want more options. And if you do the right things, that tends to happen over time.
Yep. And that's where I'm at with my business. And why I do these podcasts is, again, so I can learn and be educated when I'm sitting in front of someone whose business I'm going to be advising on and providing other managed services, not in the UC space. I'm going to be able to look them in the eye and say, hey, I'm doing the right thing by you. And I'm the guy to talk to about this specific thing, because of the fact that I actually even have my own competitors on my podcast. So I can learn about them and send them business that I make literally fractions of the amount of money on, which we're all here to do, right? We're all here to make money. But I make fractions of the amount of commissions on sending business to you versus saying something larger. But I do this so I can learn and put together real valuable information and be authentic, because I am building a business named after my son, and I want him to be able to see that. And I think that resonates with you probably because you're a family-owned business.
I like that. I think, the one thing I think in this channel side of the house, without giving names, it doesn't matter. I think it could create the temptation for advisors or salespeople or technology consultants to recommend the wrong solution to get paid more. I think that's the only part of this space that I think we have to challenge, because every quarter you have suppliers with different promotions. And it's like, if you find that beautiful opportunity with a qualified buyer for that thing, like you want to, I challenge myself to say, am I recommending this because they're paying me more or because it's better for the customer? And I think that is a fine line and I think that's part of the channel side of the house that I think is an ugly side that, I think you just have to be careful. Like, is this in the customer's best interest? And I think we have to challenge ourselves there, and not to be naive. If you're going to help the customer, it's a win-win, fine. But sometimes if you're recommending one supplier over another, like, is it for the right reasons?
Yes. And
I think
look, there's no dancing around it. It's true. And I love the fact that you approach it the same way as me. We're not here to take down people or organizations. It's not about, building us up by talking somebody else down. These are concepts that are relevant to our business. So talking about it from a conceptual level, a philosophical level, I don't see anything wrong with that. And anybody who does, quite frankly, it's probably the wrong person to be talking to if you're a decision maker, right?
Yeah. But, the overarching things always remain true. I kind of find businesses that can truly benefit from the product or service, help them. And it's, then things usually work out. I'm oversimplifying
Yeah.
complex things, but those always remain true,
Yeah. And listen, I know I don't want to get too fragment on it, and I think we've covered a lot of what
Sure.
I intended to cover here. But I want to ask you: is there a particular story? And I know you threw out a name, which I'm sure you have permission to do and everything like that. But
Yeah.
do you have a specific ideal customer profile? My favorite customer that I had, where we really did a great job by them.
I do. Okay. So the client is a storage company called Access Self Storage. They have locations, tri-state area like New Jersey and some of the states in the Northeast. They have about 22 locations. And they found us online to evaluate services. And I won't say the supplier they were on because that's below the line. They're on a VoIP supplier and they were going through the process and they ended up agreeing to switch over to our service. So it was a good sized client, like 150 people, 22 sites, the kind of clients we all want to win. And after I kind of was just like, why are you doing this? I'm like, I know you're doing it, but like, why? And they're like, that supplier we're on, it would take them 2 to 3 weeks to get someone in account management to call us back just to have a business conversation. They go, wasn't the support? Like when we're just like, hey, can we talk to someone? It would take them 2 to 3 weeks and there's always an excuse and there's always a delay. And I can't run a business where someone just won't pick up the phone and talk to me for 5 minutes and help me. And then I'll move on with my day. And I like that story because it's so damn simple. Like in this world of like sending parking rockets in reverse and AI, like it's the technology is so advanced and intimidating. I sometimes like to cling on to what is the real simple reason we do things as human beings? Because the tech can get intimidating, on a big enough level. But that's my story.
I think it fits perfectly as a consummate closing statement to everything we've covered today. In a nutshell, in my perspective, the reasons why you would look at Telelcloud and Vince and his team are because they provide all the services that you need in a way that supports you throughout the journey and it doesn't end after the sale. And they cover all of the fundamentals, not just the voice. They're not focused on selling you the latest bells and whistles, yet while still maintaining pace with the technologies as it grows and adding on services. And they're not too proud to say, hey, we don't have it all figured out. We're still evaluating our processes and we're investing time, resources, and money into building out improvements.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome.
Beautifully said.
Well, listen, maybe I have an open role over at Telelcloud. No, I'm kidding. Is there anything else you want to close us out with? Any closing messages?
No, I appreciate you inviting me on. It was fun to talk shop and best of luck in your new your business.
Appreciate it, man. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.